MTN SME Hub. Link to growth. Link to success. Link to the ultimate resource for business advice and insights.
Welcome back to the Big Small Business Show. In studio with us today, we've got Nicola and we've got Nicholas Daniels, both from the Thinking Company, and we're talking about thinking differently. So let's get really practical.
Okay.
The how. How do we think differently? I know this is all in your course, and I know, but we've got to get something out of you, right? So give us some tips.
So, Allon, I've spent a lot of time with big companies. Often it's billions. You know, it's like we want to go from 5 billion to 6 billion, or from 500 million to 1 million turnarounds. And what I've learned is that one of the weak areas of business is vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'll appreciate this. When I sat through your presentation, I was like, did he come on my program?
Maybe I did.
Yeah, I see in the back of the room. Yeah. So the starting point is actually the end point. You know, Stephen Covey wrote about it in 7 Habits, begin with the end in mind. So get really clear on that really tough question that most coaches can never get an answer to. What do you want?
Mm.
And it's almost as if we're embarrassed to say, because there's like, if I really say what I want, will I get it? Or am I entitled to it? So for me, begin with your vision. Don't start with, I've got my resources and I've got capabilities and I must leverage it. What do you want? And entrepreneurs often have two, it's like a fork in the road. Do I want it for me, or do I want it for creating value for others? So sometimes it's a combination of both. So I would start with visioning. I talk about a vision cloud, and it's nothing to do with Salesforce, but it's what does it look like? What does it feel like? And what are you doing? Not what do you have to do to get there, not all the climbing of the steps. When you're there, what is the business doing? When you're there, what does it feel like? And when you're there, what does it look like? So it's a future state. Then what I say is, now take stock. Now tell me where you're at. You know, tell me what's going on in your business. Give me the facts and figures. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Don't fabricate, just tell the truth. And then basically from there, I work with people and I get them to analyze what's working and what isn't. What do we want to keep doing? What do we need to let go of? And our ego wants to hang on to something that doesn't work because we were emotionally attached to it in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking differently isn't where you start, it's where you end after you've gone on a journey in your mind. And after we've got there, I say, okay, now let's think differently. Now let's solve the problems. Now let's innovate. Now let's think about possibility. I think there's a danger that you think you should start thinking differently to begin with, and you lack the cognitive steps to take you to the point where your idea becomes possible.
What is one tool?
Oh, there's so many. I'll talk briefly. This is actually a de Bono technique, but there are techniques that are not de Bono related, which you could also access. But one of my favorite tools was based on a book he wrote in 1972 called Poe. And it's not a Teletubby with a handbag. It stands for provocative operation. And so Poe is an acronym to say, what would happen if I did something ridiculous in my mind, which destabilizes my traditional thinking? So I'm breaking my marbles on purpose. I'm losing my marbles by design, not by accident. So he would use techniques like wishful thinking. Wouldn't it be nice if money grew on trees? He would do things like, what would happen if cars have square wheels? What would happen if there was unlimited funding for SMEs in South Africa? How would you think differently about your business? So you take away a constraint and your brain says, don't be ridiculous. So there's another technique that comes in called movement. And what you do in movement, instead of saying, don't be ridiculous, you go into the provocation like a stepping stone across a river. And you go into it to see what happens next in your thinking. And the idea that emerges is generally the possibility. The provocation itself, the Poe statement, is not always the idea, but it's a way of getting to an idea.
Nicholas, so from your perspective, give us some real applications for entrepreneurs.
All right. So me and Nicola actually acquired a publishing business in the UK, and we had no knowledge of the industry whatsoever.
Yeah.
So one of the tools, it's also a de bono tool that we used. It's called Six Thinking Hats, and it's probably one of the better known tools. And basically, each hat is a different color and serves a different purpose. So what we did is we used the 6 hats to analyze this business model. It wasn't generating any revenue. We knew nothing about the industry, as I mentioned. And each hat, you can do it in any sort of sequence, but the way that we did it is we went blue hat first, and blue hat is sort of the facilitator hat. It asks the question at the beginning, what are we trying to achieve? And it answers the question at the end. We then went on to the white hat, which is basically all about data and information. And it looks at, well, what do we know? So we didn't know a lot. We didn't know an awful lot. But what do we need to know? These are the questions you need to ask if you want the business to succeed. We have a red hat, which is kind of like a check-in, and you do this throughout the process. How do we feel about this now? As the process moves, because the result is never going to be as it was planned from the start. It always changes. Then we go into the yellow hat, and this is basically the benefits. What value about what we're doing? What does it bring to our customers? What value do our suppliers get out of this? You ask those sorts of questions. And then my personal favorite is the green hat. And this is basically idea generation. So what's happened with Be Seeing You, which is the company that we acquired, it was a publishing business, and we've actually came up with a green hat idea to completely pivot. And Nicola mentioned the Thinking Academy earlier, and we're actually going to use it as more of an application business to go with the Thinking Academy, which teaches the tools. So we're going to use the two in parallel. Then you have your black hat, which is basically your risks, your challenges. We took on this business. We didn't know anything about the industry. It wasn't generating revenue, as I was saying. We didn't know what to do. So we were like, well, so what are all the risks involved? And then again, you go back to the blue hat once you've gone through the process, and you can revisit hats if you need to. And then the blue hat right at the end will facilitates and answers the question.
When I'm listening to that, I like to think I follow a similar process when making a decision.
Okay.
Not exactly the same, but I've read the 6 Thinking Hats. So you're right. So, but you tend to tell the story you still want to tell within that. You can downplay the risks. You can still manipulate it in your head. In other words, you can design the outcome. How did you to prevent yourself from designing an outcome that you wanted instead of allow the process to unfold what might have been a different outcome?
I mean, that's a really good point, because it goes back to your marbles. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you're in a business, I'm doing let's say a pro bono session for an entrepreneur on Wednesday, and I've been a customer. And I think there's a bit of a challenge with the business model, personally, having been on the other side of it. And what you need is perspective. So I said to her, don't come on your own. Bring 2 of your team, and I'll be in the room as well. And let's happily help you think differently. If you're going to take the 6 hats and sit under a tree with your own notepad, the chances are you're going to do exactly what you said.
Yeah.
But what we did is we got some other people involved, some of which we didn't want to hear. Some of what we were hearing, we were like, damn it. But so perspective, involve other people, get your community involved, but don't do it all on your own.
That's a very good piece of advice there. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation. Stay tuned.
MTN SME Hub, link to business success.